Colorado Territory, 1871. The rugged peaks of the San Juan Mountains stood like ancient sentinels over a land that promised much but often delivered hardship. In the valley below, the small mining town of Silverdale clung to existence, its weathered buildings a testament to the stubborn will of those who sought fortune in this unforgiving wilderness. Liam Quinn had learned early that the frontier was no place for tender hearts. At 25, he'd already seen how the West could strip a man of everything but his bones, leaving nothing but bitterness behind. His mother had died of fever on the trail west when he was just 8. His father, broken by grief, had found solace in whiskey until a mining accident claimed him 3 years later. Since then, Liam had drifted, working cattle drives and breaking horses, never staying anywhere long enough to form attachments. A man out here needs nothing but his horse, his gun, and the good sense to keep moving, he often told himself, the words becoming a shield against the lonely nights under vast starlit skies. Liam sat tall in the saddle as he guided his chestnut gelding down the main street of Silverdale. His lean frame carried muscle earned through years of hard work. His face, handsome despite the thin white scar that traced his jawline, remained impassive as he scanned the town. Clear blue eyes missed nothing, and his light stubble couldn't hide the tension in his jaw. He wore simple clothes, worn denim, a faded blue shirt, leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He'd come to Silverdale chasing rumors of good work at the Blackwater mine, but he'd found little waiting for him beyond suspicion and closed doors. The silver boom was fading, leaving desperation in its wake. Now, with only $3 to his name, Liam was preparing to move on yet again. Nothing here but another dying town, he muttered to his horse as they approached the livery stable. We'll rest tonight and head south tomorrow. The livery owner, a stooped man with tobacco-stained fingers, eyed him warily. Stabling's 50 cents. Feeds extra. Liam nodded, counting out the coins from his meager funds. As he handed over the money, a commotion from the direction of the town square caught his attention. Raised voices and what sounded like a woman's protest drifted on the autumn air. What's that about? Liam asked, nodding toward the noise. The livery owner spat a stream of tobacco juice. Auction day at Elwood's place. Been advertising it for weeks. Man's finally selling off his daughter to clear his debts. Liam stiffened. Selling his daughter? That can't be legal. Calls it a bride auction. Says she agrees to it. The man shrugged. Edgar Elwood gambled away everything he had, including their home. Been owing money all over the territory. Figure this is his last play. Something cold and hard settled in Liam's stomach. He'd seen plenty of injustice in his years of drifting, had learned to look away and mind his own business. Getting involved only brought trouble. Not my concern, he said, but his feet carried him toward the square anyway. A crowd had gathered around the steps of the town hall. On the improvised platform stood a slender young woman in a modest blue dress that had seen better days. Her hands were clasped tightly before her, knuckles white with tension. Even from a distance, Liam could see she was beautiful, with honey blonde hair pulled back in a simple style and eyes that seemed to be fighting back tears. Beside her stood a man Liam assumed was Edgar Elwood, red-faced, portly, with the unmistakable tremor of a man too long in the bottle. He addressed the crowd with forced joviality that couldn't mask his desperation. Gentlemen, as advertised, today I present my daughter, Miss Emma Elwood. 20 years old, educated back east, accomplished in household matters, and of sound health and virtue. The bidding starts at $200. Liam pushed through the crowd for a better look. The young woman, Emma, stood with her chin raised, but her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone trapped, searching desperately for escape. Several men called out bids, each higher than the last. A grizzled miner, a fat shopkeeper who looked old enough to be her grandfather. The local saloon owner with a reputation for cruelty. With each bid, Emma seemed to grow paler. $500, called a rough voice that silenced the crowd. Liam turned to see Silas Harrington, the infamous owner of the Blackwater mine. Known for working men to death and keeping a private army of thugs, Harrington was the most feared man in 3 counties. He stood at the edge of the crowd, flanked by 2 armed guards, a smug smile on his face. 500 going once. Edgar Elwood called, relief evident in his voice. Emma's eyes went wide with unmistakable terror. Something snapped inside Liam. Before he could reconsider, he called out, "This is wrong." The crowd parted as he stepped forward. He felt their eyes on him. The stranger, the drifter, interfering where he didn't belong. "This woman isn't property to be sold," Liam continued, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. "Not to the highest bidder, not to anyone." Harrington's face darkened. "And who might you be, boy?" "Just someone who knows the difference between right and wrong," Liam answered, his hand instinctively moving closer to his holstered Colt. Emma Elwood sputtered, "This is a private business arrangement. My daughter has agreed, has she?" Liam cut him off, looking directly at Emma. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of two souls adrift in a harsh world. Moving with deliberate steps, Liam approached the platform. "Miss," he said, his voice softening, "you don't belong to your father. You don't belong to any man with money in his pocket. You belong to no one but yourself." Emma Elwood looked at him with eyes the color of summer sky, filled with surprise and something that might have been hope. And in that moment, everything changed. The silence that followed Liam's words stretched taut as a drawn bowstring. Emma stood frozen, her heart thundering in her chest as she stared at the stranger who had spoken the very thoughts she'd been afraid to voice. "This is outrageous," Silas Harrington snarled, his hand moving to the silver-handled revolver at his hip. "Elwood and I had an understanding." Emma Elwood mopped his brow with a handkerchief. "Now see here, young man, my daughter understands her duty. The debts must be paid, or we'll both be in the poorhouse, or worse." Emma found her voice at last. "Father," she said quietly, "I agreed because you said there was no other way. But this man is right. I am not merchandise." Her father's face contorted with anger and fear. "Girl, do you know what Harrington will do if we renege? We'll both be dead by sundown." 550, came another voice from the crowd. A cattle baron from the South Valley raised his hand, eyeing Emma like she was a prize heifer. 600, countered Harrington, his cold eyes never leaving Liam. Emma descended the steps of the platform, moving with a dignity that belied her circumstance. She approached Liam, studying the lean stranger who had disrupted the auction. "Why would you speak for me?" she asked softly, so only he could hear. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Liam replied, equally quiet. "No one should be sold against their will." "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, a tremble in her voice. "My father's debts. Harrington owns the bank and half the businesses in town. He's been pressuring me for months." Liam glanced at the gathering storm on Harrington's face, the confusion in the crowd. Making a split-second decision that went against every instinct for self-preservation he'd cultivated, he said, "You could come with me. I'm heading south tomorrow." Emma's eyes widened. "With you? But I don't even know your name." "Liam Quinn," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "I don't have much to offer, but I can get you away from here, somewhere you can make your own choices." Before Emma could respond, Harrington's voice boomed across the square. $700. And another 100 for anyone who brings me that interfering saddle tramp's head. The crowd shifted uneasily. Several men, recognizing opportunity, began to move toward Liam. "Time to decide, Miss Elwood," Liam said, tension evident in his stance. "I can help you leave, but it has to be now." Emma looked back at her father, his face contorted with greed and fear, then to Harrington's cold, possessive stare. Her whole life had been decisions made for her, by her father, by circumstance, by the expectations of others. For once, she wanted to choose. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'll go with you." Liam nodded once, then in a fluid motion drew his revolver and fired a shot into the air. The crowd scattered in momentary confusion. He took Emma's hand, and they ran, ducking down an alley between the general store and the assay office. "My horse is at the livery," Liam said as they ran, the sound of pursuit already growing behind them. Emma hitched up her skirts to match his pace. "There's a back way through here," she directed, pulling him toward a narrow passage between buildings. They emerged near the livery stable. The owner looked up in surprise as they burst in. "My horse," Liam demanded, tossing the man an extra coin. "Quick." The livery owner hesitated only a moment before leading out Liam's saddled chestnut. "Harrington's men will be coming," he warned. "We know," Emma said, breathless. Liam mounted quickly, then reached down to pull Emma up behind him. She settled against his back, her arms circling his. Emma nodded, rubbing her sore muscles. I've never ridden that far in my life. You did well, Liam said, unsaddling his gelding. Most city women would have complained the whole way. I'm not most women, Emma replied, a hint of pride in her voice. And Silverdale hardly qualifies as a city. I grew up there after my mother died, but I was born in Boston. Liam glanced at her with new interest as he brushed down his horse. Boston? That explains the way you talk. What brought your family west? Emma's expression darkened. My father's dreams of silver. Mother died of mountain fever our first winter here. After that, she shrugged, looking away. Father changed. Started drinking, gambling. The mine never produced as he hoped. Liam nodded, understanding too well how the West could break a man's spirit. He gathered wood and built a small, well-concealed fire, then pulled provisions from his saddlebags, jerky, hardtack, and coffee. It's not much, he apologized, offering her a share. Emma accepted gratefully. It's more than I expected. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes directly. Not just for the food, for what you did back there. No one's ever stood up for me like that. Liam shifted uncomfortably and used to gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same. No, she said softly. They wouldn't. You saw what happened. A dozen men bid on me like I was livestock, including the town minister. Liam's jaw tightened. Your father had no right. He believed he did, Emma said, staring into the fire. In his mind, I was his to dispose of as he saw fit. She paused, studying Liam's face in the flickering light. Why were you in Silverdale? You're obviously not from around there. Just passing through, Liam replied, pouring coffee into a tin cup. I don't stay anywhere long. A drifter, Emma observed. Nowhere to call home. Home is where I hang my hat, Liam said with practiced nonchalance. The open country suits me fine. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young and vulnerable. What will happen to me now? Where are we going? It was a question Liam hadn't fully considered in the heat of their escape. There's a settlement about 2 days' ride south. Rivercross. Decent enough place. You could find work there, make a fresh start. And you? Emma asked. Will you stay? Liam hesitated. I'm not one for staying, Miss Elwood. I'll see you safely there, then move on. That was our agreement. Emma nodded slowly, disappointment flitting across her features. Of course. I have no money, no possessions beyond this dress. Starting over won't be easy. You've got grit, Liam observed. I can tell. You'll manage. Emma smiled slightly. My mother used to say the same thing, that I had grit. She grew serious again. Mr. Quinn, there's something you should know. Silas Harrington isn't a man who forgets being crossed. He'll look for us. Let him look, Liam said with more confidence than he felt. By tomorrow we'll be deep in territory he doesn't control. They fell silent, the crackling fire and night sounds of the forest filling the space between them. Liam noticed Emma shivering and shrugged off his coat, draping it around her shoulders. Get some sleep, he said. I'll keep watch. Emma clutched the coat around herself, inhaling the scent of leather, horse, and something uniquely male that she found oddly comforting. Thank you, she murmured, settling onto the ground near the fire. For everything. Liam nodded, moving to sit with his back against a tree, rifle across his lap. He watched as Emma curled on her side, her blonde hair spilling loose from its pins, golden in the firelight. As her breathing slowed into sleep, Liam wondered what madness had possessed him to intervene. He'd spent years avoiding entanglements, protecting himself from the pain that came with caring too much. Yet something about Emma Elwood's quiet dignity had pierced his carefully constructed armor. One day he promised himself, just get her to Rivercross, then move on. No attachments. But even as he thought it, he knew something had already changed. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone with just his horse and the stars for company. And though he'd never admit it, the knowledge brought an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the fire before him. Dawn broke over the mountains in streaks of gold and crimson. Emma awoke to find Liam already up, coffee brewing over a small fire. She sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles from yesterday's ride and a night on the hard ground. Morning, Liam said, offering her a cup of the strong, black coffee. Sleep well. Emma accepted the cup, wrapping her cold fingers around its warmth. Better than I expected, she admitted. She hesitated, then added, I had a dream about him. Harrington. That he found us. Liam's expression grew serious. We covered our tracks well, but we should move soon. I know these mountains better than most, but Harrington has men who can track. How do you know the area so well? Emma asked, sipping the bitter coffee. A shadow crossed Liam's face. My father worked the mines around here for years before he died. I learned every trail and creek while hunting to keep us fed. I'm sorry about your father, Emma said softly. Liam shrugged, his usual response to sympathy. It was a long time ago. They ate a sparse breakfast, then quickly broke camp. As Liam saddled his horse, Emma approached him hesitantly. Mr. Quinn, Liam, she said. I realize I'm already deeply in your debt, but I have a favor to ask. He turned, raising an eyebrow. What is it? There's a place, about 3 miles east of here. A small cabin that belonged to my mother's friend, Sarah Gardner. She died last winter, and the place has been abandoned since. I'd like to stop there if we could. She left some things for me, including clothes that might be more suitable for travel than this dress. Liam frowned. It's not on our way, and any detour increases the risk. Please, Emma persisted. It won't take long, and there might be supplies we could use. Sarah was a healer of sorts. She always kept food, preserves, medicines. Liam studied her earnest face, then sighed. 3 miles, you say? We'll make it quick. They rode east, Emma directing them through increasingly dense forest until they reached a small clearing where a modest log cabin stood, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. The place had clearly been untouched for months, but remained in decent repair. Wait here, Liam said as they dismounted. He approached cautiously, hand on his revolver, and checked the cabin before motioning Emma forward. All clear. Inside, the single-room cabin was neat but dusty. A bed with a handmade quilt occupied one corner, a stone fireplace dominated another, and simple furniture filled the rest of the space. Emma moved directly to a wooden trunk at the foot of the bed. Sarah wrote to me before she died, she explained, kneeling to open the trunk. She had no family, so she left her things to me. My father never let me come claim them. From the trunk, Emma withdrew several practical items of clothing: a riding skirt, 2 simple blouses, a woolen shawl, and sturdy boots. Beneath these was a small leather pouch that clinked when she lifted it. Her savings, Emma said with evident surprise. I didn't know she had anything put aside. Liam, who had been checking the cabin's food stores, turned at this. How much? Emma counted quickly. $23. It's not much, but it's more than I had an hour ago. It's something, Liam agreed. I found some preserved fruit, dried beans, and jerky. And there's a good hunting knife here we could use. Emma nodded, then hesitated. Would you mind? I'd like to change my clothes. Of course, Liam said, suddenly awkward. I'll wait outside. Check on the horse. While Liam paced outside, Emma quickly changed into the riding skirt and one of the blouses, grateful to be free of her increasingly dirty dress. The boots were slightly large, but serviceable with an extra pair of stockings. She braided her hair tightly and pinned it up, then gathered what supplies she could find, including a small medical kit Sarah had kept. When she emerged from the cabin, Liam did a double take. The transformation was striking. In place of the delicate town girl stood a capable-looking woman, her clothing practical for the journey ahead. Better? Emma asked, noticing his expression. More suitable, Liam said simply, though his eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary. We should move on. They packed the supplies, and Emma took one last look at the cabin. Sarah used to tell me I should live free, make my own way, she said quietly. I think she'd be pleased to know her things are helping me do just that. As they prepared to leave, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Liam's hand flew to his gun. Quick, back inside, he ordered, leading Emma and his horse behind the cabin just as 3 riders emerged from the trees. Peering carefully around the corner, Liam recognized 2 of Harrington's men, accompanied by a tracker in buckskins. They're following our trail from yesterday, Liam whispered. Must have guessed we'd head south. What do we do? Emma asked, fear evident in her hushed voice. Liam surveyed their options. The cabin's too obvious. If they search it, we're trapped. He pointed to a dense thicket behind the cabin that led to a steep, rocky incline. We'll leave the horse here and go up that way on foot. The rocks won't hold tracks. Emma nodded, gathering her courage. They quietly secured the horse in a small natural enclosure of boulders and thick brush, then began making their way up the rocky slope. careful to stay low and hidden. Below, they could hear the men. "Check it anyway," ordered another. Jenkins, circle around back. Liam and Emma froze as one of the men dismounted and began walking toward the rear of the cabin. They pressed themselves against the rocks, barely breathing. The man called Jenkins passed within 20 feet of them, but his attention was on the cabin, not the seemingly impassable rock face behind it. After what felt like an eternity, the men regrouped. "Nothing here," Jenkins reported. "But someone's been inside recently. Dust is disturbed. Could be anyone," the tracker said. "Local hunter, maybe. But I can pick up their trail heading south from here. They can't be far ahead." The men mounted up and rode south, following the false trail that would eventually lead nowhere. Once they were out of sight, Liam and Emma continued their careful climb up the rocky slope. "That was too close," Emma whispered once they reached the top. Liam nodded grimly. "They're more determined than I expected. We'll have to be smarter, take a route they won't anticipate." "What about your horse?" Emma asked. "We'll circle back for him after dark. For now, we keep moving north and west, stay off any trails." As they made their way through the wilderness, Emma surprised Liam with her resilience. Despite her refined upbringing, she matched his pace without complaint, even as the terrain grew increasingly difficult. "Where did you learn to move so quietly through the woods?" he asked after she navigated a particularly challenging section of fallen timber. Emma smiled slightly. "Sarah taught me. When I could escape my father's watch, I'd come to her cabin. She showed me how to gather herbs, track small game. Said every woman should know how to fend for herself." Liam nodded, a new respect in his eyes. "Your Sarah sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Emma agreed, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. "I miss her. She was more of a parent to me than my father ever was after Mother died." As the day wore on, they spoke little, conserving energy for the difficult journey. But something had shifted between them, a growing respect, perhaps, or something deeper that neither was ready to name. By the time dusk fell, they had covered several miles of rough country. Liam found a sheltered overhang where they could rest before retrieving his horse. "You should eat something," he said, offering Emma some of the jerky they'd taken from the cabin. She accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of her hunger. "Thank you. Not just for the food. For knowing what to do back there. I would have been lost on my own." Liam shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You're handling yourself better than most would." Emma studied him in the fading light. "You don't accept praise easily, do you?" "Not much call for it in my line of work," he replied. "And what exactly is that work?" Emma asked. "Beyond drifting?" Liam hesitated. "Whatever pays. Breaking horses, driving cattle, guiding travelers. I've done a bit of everything." "No family," she pressed gently. "None living," he said shortly, then sighed at her persistent gaze. "My mother died on the trail west when I was 8. Fever took her in a matter of days. My father never recovered from losing her. Turned to the bottle, died in a mining accident 3 years later." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "We have that in common then. Losing parents too young." Liam nodded, uncomfortable with the connection. "I learned early that attachments are dangerous out here. People leave, one way or another. Best to rely on yourself." "Is that why you move on? So you never have to watch anyone else leave?" Emma asked with unexpected insight. Liam looked at her sharply, then away. "We should rest. It'll be a few hours before it's safe to go back for the horse." Emma recognized the deflection but didn't push. Instead, she wrapped Sarah's shawl tighter around herself and leaned back against the rock wall, watching as Liam kept vigilant watch, his profile strong against the gathering darkness. She wondered what it would be like to break through the walls he'd built around himself, to reach the man who had risked everything to defend a stranger's freedom. The thought brought an unexpected warmth to her chest, and a new determination that surprised her with its strength. The next morning found them continuing westward, Liam's retrieved horse carrying their modest supplies. They had escaped Harrington's men for now, but Liam remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "Where exactly are we going?" Emma asked as they picked their way along a narrow ridge, the valley spreading below them in a patchwork of autumn colors. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 10 miles from here," Liam explained. "Man named Hollister used it for years. He died last winter, but the place should still be sound. We can rest there, then cut southwest toward River Cross." "You seem to know everyone who's died in these mountains," Emma observed with a hint of a smile. Liam's lips quirked slightly. Hazard of the profession. Old trappers, prospectors, they don't tend to last long out here. But they leave good shelters behind. They traveled in companionable silence, stopping occasionally to rest the horse. During one such break, sitting beside a small stream, Emma watched Liam refill their canteens. "Tell me about Rivercross," she said. "What kind of place is it?" Liam considered the question. "Growing town. Not as rough as some. Has a schoolhouse, proper church. The kind of place that's settling down as families move in." "And what sort of work might a woman find there?" Emma asked. "The usual. Cooking, cleaning, maybe teaching if you've got education. The hotel might need help." Liam hesitated, then added, "You're educated, you said. From Boston. What did you learn there?" Emma's eyes brightened at the question. "I attended Miss Harrington's school for young ladies until I was 16. Reading, writing, arithmetic, of course. But also botany, which I loved. And music. I play the piano." She laughed softly. "Not that there are many pianos in these mountains." "The church in Rivercross has one," Liam said. "Old and out of tune, but still a piano." Emma looked at him with surprise. "You notice pianos?" Liam shifted uncomfortably. "My mother played. Before." He cleared his throat and stood. "We should keep moving." They continued their journey, the terrain gradually becoming more difficult. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered overhead, and a chill wind whipped through the trees. "Storm's coming," Liam said, eyeing the sky with concern. "We need to find shelter before it hits." The first heavy raindrops began to fall just as they spotted Hollister's cabin tucked against a rocky hillside. They made a dash for it, the skies opening above them. By the time they reached the door, both were thoroughly soaked. The cabin was small but sturdy, its interior dusty but dry. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and rough-hewn furniture, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed, filled the single room. "Not exactly the Palmer house," Liam said, shaking water from his hat. "But it'll keep us dry." Emma wrung water from her braid, shivering. "It's perfect." Liam busied himself with starting a fire while Emma explored the small space. The old trapper had left various supplies behind. Cooking utensils, a few preserved goods, even some extra clothing hanging from pegs. "Look at this," she said, holding up a heavy wool sweater. "It's enormous, but dry." Liam glanced up from the now crackling fire. "Take it. And anything else that might fit. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." Emma blushed slightly at his directness, but knew he was right. She gathered the sweater and a pair of 2 large trousers. "Turn your back, please." Liam obliged, focusing on arranging their wet things near the fire to dry. Behind him, he could hear the rustle of fabric as Emma changed. He found himself unexpectedly aware of her presence, of the soft sounds of her movements. It had been a long time since he'd shared such close quarters with anyone, let alone a woman. "You can turn around now," Emma said after a few minutes. Liam turned to find her swimming in Hollister's old clothes, the sweater hanging past her hips, the trousers rolled up multiple times at the ankles. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, drying in the heat from the fire. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable, but also strangely at home in the rustic setting. "Your turn," she said, gesturing to a flannel shirt she'd found. "You're soaked through as well." Liam hesitated, then nodded. Emma politely turned away while he changed, hanging his wet clothes beside hers. Outside, the storm had intensified, rain lashing against the small windows, wind howling through the trees. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin in brief, stark light, followed by the crash of thunder. "Looks like we're here for the night," Liam observed, moving to check the cabin's meager supplies. He found some coffee, beans, and dried meat, enough for a simple meal. As the evening deepened, they sat before the fire, warm mugs in hand, the storm raging outside creating a strange sense of intimacy inside the small cabin. "May I ask you something?" Emma said after a companionable silence. Liam nodded, his face partially shadowed in the firelight. "Why did you really help me? Back in Silverdale. You could have just kept writing." Liam stared into the flames for a long moment. "I've seen too much injustice go unchallenged," he finally said. "Men like your father, like Harrington, they believe they can own people, control them." His jaw tightened. "My father worked himself to death in a mine owned by a man not much different from Harrington. Man who saw workers as tools to be used up and discarded." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. Liam shrugged. It was a long time ago, but when I saw you standing there, being sold like prop. Emma held his gaze. Is that why you don't stay anywhere? So no one can claim you. The question hit closer to home than Liam was comfortable with. He looked away. Maybe, he admitted. Seems safer that way. Safer, perhaps, Emma said. But lonely. Liam didn't answer, but the truth of her words resonated in the silence between them. What about you? He asked after a while. What will you do once we reach River Cross? Emma considered the question. Find work. Make my own way. Perhaps save enough to travel further west, to California maybe. Big dreams, Liam observed. I've had little else, Emma replied with a sad smile. Dreams were the one thing my father couldn't take from me. As the night deepened and the storm gradually subsided, they prepared for sleep. The cabin's single bed presented an obvious dilemma. You take it, Liam said, spreading his bedroll on the floor near the fire. I've slept on worse. Emma hesitated, then nodded, too tired to argue. She settled onto the narrow bed, pulling the rough blanket up to her chin. Good night, Liam. And thank you, again. Sleep well, he replied, lying down on his makeshift bed. But sleep proved elusive for both of them. Liam found himself acutely aware of Emma's presence just a few feet away, of her soft breathing in the darkness. And Emma, staring at the shadowed ceiling, felt a strange new sensation taking root inside her. Not just gratitude toward her rescuer, but something deeper and more complicated. In the quiet darkness, with the dying fire casting long shadows on the cabin walls, something was shifting between them, something neither was ready to name, but both could feel. The morning after the storm broke clear and bright, the mountain air washed clean by the rain. They set out early, Liam estimating they could reach River Cross by nightfall if they made good time. As they rode, something had changed between them. A new ease, a comfort in each other's company that hadn't existed before. Emma sat behind Liam on the horse, her arms around his waist no longer hesitant but secure, as if they had traveled this way for years rather than days. They stopped at midday in a sunny clearing to rest the horse and eat some of the provisions they'd gathered from Hollister's cabin. Sitting on a fallen log, Emma watched as Liam checked the gelding's hooves. He's a fine horse, she observed. Does he have a name? Rusty, Liam replied, patting the chestnut's neck. Not very original, but it suits him. Emma smiled. I had a pony when I was a girl, back in Boston. Buttercup. I cried for days when we had to sell her to move west. Liam straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. You miss the East? Sometimes, Emma admitted. The museums, the libraries, the certainty of it all. She gazed at the wild landscape around them. But there's a freedom here that Boston never had. A sense that you can remake yourself. If you survive, Liam added with a wry smile. If you survive, Emma agreed. But isn't that true anywhere? Life offers no guarantees. Liam looked at her with newfound respect. Most women of her background would be falling apart after what she'd been through, yet here she sat, philosophical about their circumstances. You're not what I expected, Emma Elwood, he said, surprising himself with the admission. She raised an eyebrow. And what did you expect? Liam shrugged. Someone more fragile, I suppose. Disappointment abounds, Emma replied with mock seriousness, then laughed at his expression. I'm teasing you, Liam. Though I'll take it as a compliment that you find me hardier than anticipated. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually guarded face. You should laugh more often, Emma said before she could stop herself. It suits you. Liam looked momentarily taken aback, then nodded toward the horizon. We should keep moving. Still a fair distance to cover. As they continued their journey, the terrain gradually became less rugged. By late afternoon, they could see the first signs of civilization. A distant farmhouse, fields of harvested wheat, a road winding through the valley below. River Cross lies just beyond that ridge, Liam explained, pointing ahead. We'll be there before sundown. Emma felt a sudden tightness in her chest. Their journey was ending. Soon Liam would deliver her to town as promised. And then, what? He'd made it clear from the beginning that he intended to move on, to continue his solitary existence. And she would be left to start yet another new life, alone. The thought brought an unexpected ache. In just a few days, this taciturn cowboy had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully explain, even to herself. His quiet strength, his uncompromising sense of justice, the glimpses of tenderness beneath his guarded exterior, all had touched something deep within her. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "After River Cross?" Liam hesitated. "There's work in Wyoming, I hear. Cattle drives heading north in the spring." "So far," Emma said softly. "That's the point," Liam replied, then immediately regretted the words when he felt Emma stiffen slightly behind him. They rode in silence for a while, the atmosphere between them suddenly charged with unspoken words. As they crested a hill overlooking a bend in the river, Liam pulled the horse to a stop. "Something wrong?" Emma asked. Liam pointed to a plume of dust on the road ahead. "Riders. Coming fast." He guided the horse off the trail into a stand of trees, watching intently as the riders came into view. 5 men, riding hard, led by a figure Emma recognized immediately. "Harrington," she whispered, her arms tightening around Liam's waist. "How did he find us?" "Must have realized we doubled back," Liam muttered, his mind racing through their options. "They're heading for River Cross. Probably figure that's where we're bound." "What do we do now?" Emma asked, fear evident in her voice. Liam studied the terrain, considering. "There's another way into town. Less direct, follows the river. But it means we won't make it before nightfall." "Better late than captured," Emma said with forced lightness. Liam guided them down toward the river, following a barely visible game trail. The going was slower, the path frequently obstructed by fallen trees and rocky outcroppings. By the time dusk fell, they had made perhaps half the distance to town. "We'll need to make camp," Liam decided as darkness settled around them. Too dangerous to continue in the dark, especially with Harrington's men about. He found a suitable spot in a small hollow near the river, sheltered by large boulders and thick vegetation. After tending to the horse, he built a small, nearly smokeless fire, careful to keep it hidden from any watching eyes. They ate a sparse meal of the last provisions from Hollister's cabin, the weight of their situation settling heavily between them. "He won't give up, will he?" Emma finally said, voicing what they both knew. Liam met her eyes across the small fire. Men like Harrington don't accept defeat easily, especially not public humiliation. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire's warmth. "I've put you in terrible danger. You should never have helped me." "Don't say that," Liam replied, his voice unexpectedly fierce. "I made my choice. I don't regret it. Even now, with Harrington hunting us. Even now." The simple conviction in his voice stirred something in Emma. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why risk so much for a stranger?" Liam stared into the flames, struggling with words that didn't come easily to him. "Because what he was doing was wrong," he said finally. "And because—" He hesitated, then looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" Emma asked, barely breathing. "That some things are worth fighting for." He paused, then added quietly, "Some people are worth fighting for." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Emma felt her heart beating faster, aware that they were approaching some threshold she hadn't anticipated when she'd fled Silverdale with this quiet, determined man. "We should get some rest," Liam said, breaking the moment. "I'll take first watch." Emma nodded, settling down near the fire, using her saddle as a pillow. But sleep eluded her as she watched Liam's silhouette against the starlit sky, his rifle across his knees, vigilant and protective. She realized, with sudden clarity, that she didn't want to reach River Cross. Didn't want this journey, this connection, to end. The thought both frightened and exhilarated her. For a woman who had spent her life being directed by others, this fierce wanting was something entirely new. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into uneasy sleep, dreaming of pursuit and capture, of Harrington's cold eyes and her father's bitter accusations. But in each dream, Liam appeared, steadfast and unafraid, standing between her and danger. What she couldn't know was that as Liam kept his solitary watch, his thoughts mirrored her own, filled with conflict about the future, about the unexpected impact of this woman on his carefully isolated existence. For the first time in years, the prospect of moving on alone brought no comfort, only a hollow ache he couldn't ignore. Dawn was still hours away, and in the darkness, certainties were shifting like sand beneath their feet. The morning brought fog that clung to the river valley, shrouding the landscape in ghostly white. Liam, who had eventually dozed off toward dawn after Emma insisted on taking a watch, awoke with a start to find her crouched nearby, rifle in hand, scanning the misty surroundings. "Anything?" he asked, immediately alert. Emma shook her head. "All quiet. But the fog." She gestured at the thick white blanket that reduced visibility to mere yards. Liam nodded, understanding her concern. The fog would hide them, but it would also hide anyone searching for them. They could ride straight into Harrington's men without seeing them until it was too late. "We wait," he decided. "Fog usually burns off by mid-morning. Better to delay than blunder into trouble." They made a cold breakfast, not risking a fire in daylight. As they ate, Emma studied Liam's face, noting the shadows under his eyes. "You should rest more," she said. "You've barely slept since Silverdale." Liam shrugged. "Used to it. In my line of work, sleeping too soundly can get you killed." "What a terrible way to live," Emma observed quietly. "It's just living," Liam replied. "No different from anyone else out here." Emma shook her head. "That's not true. There are families, communities, people who find joy and connection despite the hardships." "And you think that's better?" Liam asked, a defensive edge to his voice. "I think it's more human," Emma said simply. "To need others. To let yourself be needed." Liam looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. The fog starting to thin. "We should prepare to move out." As he checked their gear and saddled the horse, Emma watched him with growing certainty that she was losing something precious, a connection she'd barely begun to understand, but one that had already changed her. By mid-morning, as Liam had predicted, the fog had mostly dissipated, revealing the valley stretching before them. They could see the small town of Rivercross in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, the church steeple prominent against the blue sky. "We'll approach from the south," Liam explained as they mounted up. "Less obvious than coming in along the main road. There's a widow there, Martha Wilson, who might take you in until you find your feet. Good woman, fair-minded." Emma nodded, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. He had it all planned out, her future without him, neatly arranged. "And you?" she asked. "Where will you go?" "North, probably," Liam replied, not meeting her eyes. "Wyoming, like I said. Or maybe Montana." "I see," Emma said softly. "When?" "After I make sure you're settled. Tomorrow, maybe the next day." The words fell between them like stones. Emma wanted to protest, to beg him to stay, but pride kept her silent. He had rescued her, protected her, brought her to safety. She had no right to ask for more. They rode in heavy silence, following the river's curve toward town. As they crossed a shallow ford, Liam suddenly reined in, his posture alert. "What is it?" Emma asked, instantly tense. Liam pointed to the muddy bank. "Tracks fresh. At least 4 horses, headed toward town." "Harrington," Emma whispered. "Can't be sure, but it's likely. We need to be careful." He studied the surrounding terrain, thinking. "There's another approach. Through the old Henderson place. Abandoned years back, but the trail's still there. Might let us slip into town unnoticed." He guided them away from the river, cutting across open country toward a distant stand of trees. They rode cautiously, Liam constantly scanning the horizon for signs of danger. As they approached the tree line, Emma felt his body tense. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Not sure," Liam murmured. "Something doesn't feel right." They entered the woods, following a narrow trail that wound between ancient trees. The silence was profound, broken only by their horses' footfalls and the occasional call of a distant bird. "The Henderson place should be just ahead," Liam said, his voice low. "Old homestead, abandoned after the drought of '66. As they rounded a bend in the trail, the trees suddenly opened into a small clearing. And there, waiting, sat 3 riders, 2 of Harrington's men, their faces familiar from Silverdale, and a third man Emma had never seen, older and harder looking than the others. Well, the older man said, his voice cold with satisfaction. "Liam Quinn. Still predictable after all these years." Liam went rigid in the saddle. "Jackson," he said, the single word laden with history. "You know him?" Emma whispered, confused and frightened. "From a long time ago," Liam replied, his hand hovering near his gun. "He worked for the man who owned the mine where my father died." Jackson smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Harrington's offering good money for the girl. Double for you, Quinn. Seems you've made quite an enemy." "Right away, Jackson," Liam said evenly. This doesn't concern you. $500 concerns me plenty, Jackson replied. Nothing personal, just business. In one fluid motion, Liam pushed Emma from the horse, shouting, "Run," as he drew his revolver. Gunfire erupted immediately, bullets splintering the trees around them. Emma scrambled for cover, terrified but clear-headed enough to remember the small derringer Liam had given her days before. She pulled it from her pocket, heart pounding. Liam had taken cover behind a fallen log, exchanging fire with the three men. He was outnumbered, but his position offered better protection. One of Harrington's men cried out, clutching his shoulder as Liam's shot found its mark. Jackson barked orders, trying to flank Liam's position. Emma realized with horror that one of the men was circling around, attempting to get behind them. Without thinking, she aimed the derringer and fired at the approaching man. The shot went wide, but it was enough to startle him, making him duck for cover. Liam used the distraction to adjust his position, moving to better protect Emma. "Stay down," he shouted to her over the gunfire. The firefight continued, a deadly dance of advance and retreat. Liam managed to wound another of Jackson's men, but ammunition was running low, and Jackson himself remained unscathed. "Give it up, Quinn," Jackson called. "You're outgunned and surrounded. Hand over the girl, and maybe I'll let you walk away." "Not happening, Jackson," Liam replied, his voice steady despite the dire situation. Emma, crouched behind a large tree, saw movement to her right. The wounded man Liam had shot first, creeping through the underbrush, a knife in his hand. He was heading toward Liam's position, using the gunfire as cover for his approach. Without hesitation, Emma grabbed a heavy branch from the ground and moved silently toward the threat. As the man raised his knife, preparing to lunge at Liam's exposed back, Emma swung the branch with all her strength, connecting solidly with his head. He crumpled without a sound. Liam glanced back, momentarily shocked to see Emma standing over the unconscious man. Their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding before the whine of another bullet forced them back to the reality of their situation. "Two down," Liam muttered. "But Jackson won't quit." As if to prove his point, Jackson called out again. "I've got all day, Quinn. You're not getting past me." Emma, now crouched beside Liam behind the log, touched his arm. "Is there another way out of these woods?" Liam nodded grimly. "To the east. But we'd be exposed crossing that open ground. They'd cut us down before we made it halfway. What if they were distracted?" Emma suggested, an idea forming. Liam looked at her sharply. "What are you thinking?" Emma explained quickly, her plan simple but dangerous. Liam's initial response was an emphatic no, but as Jackson and his remaining man continued to press their advantage, their options dwindled. "It's too risky," Liam insisted. "Do you have a better idea?" Emma countered. "We can't stay here forever." Finally, with great reluctance, Liam agreed. "On my signal." "And Emma." He hesitated, then said simply, "Be careful." Emma nodded, gathering her courage. While Liam provided covering fire, she slipped away, circling back through the trees toward where they'd left their horse. The animal had bolted at the first shots, but hadn't gone far, tethered as it was by training and loyalty. Finding Rusty nervously pawing the ground at the edge of the clearing, Emma whispered soothingly to the frightened animal. She quickly untied their saddlebags and removed a small tin of kerosene they'd found at Hollister's cabin, intended for his lamps. Heart pounding, Emma moved to the opposite side of the clearing from where Liam was pinned down. There, she carefully poured the kerosene in a line across dry leaves and underbrush, then used matches to light it. The fire caught quickly in the dry autumn conditions, creating a barrier of flames and smoke between Jackson and his quarry. "Now, Liam," she shouted, running back toward where she'd left Rusty. Liam, seeing the wall of fire spreading rapidly, made a break from his position, firing his remaining bullets to keep Jackson pinned down. The smoke was already thick, obscuring visibility, creating the diversion they desperately needed. He reached Emma and the horse just as the fire began to spread beyond their control. Together they mounted Rusty and galloped eastward, away from the flames and their pursuers. Behind them, they could hear Jackson shouting curses, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. The fire, while dangerous, was contained by the natural firebreak of the clearing and would likely burn itself out before spreading too far. They rode hard for nearly an hour before Emma, arms still wrapped tightly around his waist, managed a shaky laugh. Perhaps both. Liam turned in the saddle to face her more directly. You saved my life back there. With that man with the knife. And then with the fire. You've been saving mine since Silverdale, Emma replied simply. It seemed only fair to return the favor. Something shifted in Liam's expression, a softening, a lowering of defenses. For a moment, he looked as though he might say more, but then he turned forward again, urging Rusty toward town. We need to reach Rivercross, he said. Warn the sheriff about Jackson and Harrington's men. They won't give up so easily. Emma nodded, though he couldn't see her. The moment had passed, but something had changed between them, something profound and irreversible. In the chaos of gunfire and flames, a truth had emerged that neither could ignore for much longer, no matter how hard they tried. Rivercross presented a picture of frontier civilization as Liam and Emma rode down its main street in the late afternoon sun. Wooden buildings lined the dusty thoroughfare, a general store, saloon, small hotel, and the whitewashed church whose steeple they'd seen from a distance. People moved about their business, pausing occasionally to eye the newcomers with the cautious curiosity typical of western towns. Their first stop was the sheriff's office, a modest building with a small jail attached. Sheriff Thomas Miller was a grizzled veteran of the frontier, his weathered face speaking of decades of hard living and harder decisions. He listened intently as Liam explained their situation, from the auction in Silverdale to the encounter with Jackson and Harrington's men in the woods. Silas Harrington, Miller mused, leaning back in his chair. Man's got influence, even this far south, and a reputation for holding grudges. We need to send a wire to the territorial marshal, Liam insisted. What Harrington tried to do, selling a woman against her will, it's not just wrong, it's illegal. Miller rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Maybe so, but proving it won't be easy, especially with her father involved in the arrangement. He glanced at Emma. Begging your pardon, Miss Elwood. Emma straightened in her chair. My father was desperate and wrong. I never consented to being sold like property. And Jackson, Liam pressed. He and his men shot at us without provocation. That's attempted murder. I'll put out word, Miller conceded. Have my deputy watch the approaches to town. But Quinn, you should know, my jurisdiction only stretches so far. This town, the immediate surroundings. Beyond that. He shrugged expressively. Liam nodded, understanding the limitations. In the territories, law was often more theory than practice, especially when powerful men like Harrington were involved. In the meantime, the sheriff continued. You both look like you could use rest and a hot meal. Martha Wilson might have a room to let for the lady. As for you, Quinn, the hotel's got beds for 2 bits a night. They thanked the sheriff and left, both feeling the weight of unfinished business. Harrington and Jackson were still out there, and their grudge wouldn't fade easily. Let's find this Martha Wilson, Liam said as they walked down the street, leading Rusty by the reins. Get you settled. Emma nodded, though the prospect of separating from Liam, even temporarily, filled her with unexpected dread. In just a few days, he had become her anchor in a world turned upside down. Martha Wilson proved to be a forthright woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Her small house at the edge of town was neat and well-kept, with a thriving garden and chickens pecking in the yard. Of course she can stay, Martha declared after hearing an abbreviated version of their story. Any young woman escaping such circumstances deserves help. She eyed Emma critically but kindly. You look dead on your feet, child, and in need of proper clothes. Thank you, Emma said, genuine gratitude in her voice. I can work, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. We'll discuss that later, Martha replied. For now, you need rest. Both of you, she added, turning her appraising gaze to Liam. You look no better, young man. When did you last sleep properly? Liam smiled slightly. Can't rightly remember, ma'am. Then it's been too long, Martha declared. You'll stay for supper, at least. And we've a small room off the kitchen where my son stayed before he moved to Denver. It's yours if you want it, rather than that flea trap they call a hotel. Liam opened his mouth to decline, then glanced at Emma's hopeful expression and reconsidered. That's very kind, Mrs. Wilson. I'd be grateful. Martha, she corrected. We don't stand on ceremony here. After seeing to Rusty's comfort in Martha's small barn, they were ushered inside the cozy house. Martha insisted they both clean up before the evening meal, providing Emma with a simple dress that had belonged to her daughter and directing Liam to fresh water and soap. The transformation was remarkable. Cleaned of trailed dust, wearing borrowed but clean clothes, they sat down to Martha's table looking almost civilized. The hot meal, rabbit stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, was the first proper food they'd had in days, and they ate with the enthusiasm of the truly hungry. As dusk fell, Martha lit lamps and served coffee in the small sitting room. The domesticity of the scene was so far removed from their recent experiences that it felt almost dreamlike. "Now," Martha said, settling into her rocking chair with her own cup, "tell me what you plan to do, Emma, beyond hiding from this Harrington character." Emma glanced at Liam, who was staring into his coffee as if it held the secrets of the universe. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "Find work, if possible. Save enough to—" She hesitated, realizing her former plan to travel further west no longer held the same appeal. "The church is looking for a teacher," Martha offered. "Reverend Sullivan mentioned it just last Sunday. Previous teacher married a rancher from up north and left last month." "A teacher?" Emma repeated, surprised. "But I don't have formal training." "You said you were educated in Boston," Liam pointed out, looking up. "That's more schooling than most folks around here ever get." "He's right," Martha agreed. "If you can read, write, and cipher, you're qualified. The pay's not much, but it's respectable work." Emma considered the possibility. Teaching had never been her ambition, but it would provide immediate income and a place in the community. "I could inquire, I suppose. I'll introduce you to Reverend Sullivan tomorrow," Martha decided. "But for now, I suspect you both need sleep more than plans." She showed Emma to the small bedroom that had been her daughter's, and Liam to the even smaller room off the kitchen. As they parted for the night, there was an awkwardness between them, the intimacy of their journey suddenly constrained by the conventions of civilization. "Sleep well," Liam said formally. "And you?" Emma replied, wanting to say more but finding no words adequate for the tumult of her feelings. Alone in the neat little bedroom, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the past days. She had escaped one fate only to face another kind of uncertainty. The teaching position, if she secured it, would provide independence, exactly what she had longed for. Yet the prospect brought less joy than she would have expected, because it would mean watching Liam ride away. North to Wyoming or Montana, he had said, back to his solitary existence, moving always, connecting with no one. The thought brought an ache so profound it surprised her with its intensity. In the room off the kitchen, Liam lay awake despite his exhaustion, his mind no less troubled. Tomorrow or the next day, he had told Emma. That was when he would leave. It had always been the plan, get her safely to Rivercross, see her settled, then move on. Yet now, faced with the reality of departure, he found himself uncharacteristically reluctant. The thought of riding away, of never seeing her again, created a hollow feeling in his chest he couldn't explain away. "It's for the best," he told himself. Emma deserved stability, a chance at a normal life, not the uncertain existence he could offer, always moving, always watching over his shoulder. But as sleep finally claimed him, his dreams were filled with honey-blonde hair and eyes like summer sky, and the memory of how it felt to have someone fight beside him, rather than simply survive alone. The next morning brought a semblance of normalcy that felt strange after the intensity of their journey. Martha served breakfast, Emma helped with dishes, and Liam tended to Rusty in the small barn. It was all so domestic, so ordinary, that the events of the past days seemed almost like a fever dream. As promised, Martha accompanied Emma to meet Reverend Sullivan, leaving Liam to his own devices. He used the time to visit the general store, replenishing supplies depleted during their flight from Silverdale. The routine tasks felt hollow somehow, mechanical preparations for a departure he was no longer certain he wanted to make. At the sheriff's office, he found Miller reviewing wanted posters with his young deputy. "Any sign of Jackson or Harrington's men?" Liam asked after declining the offer of coffee. Miller shook his head. "Nothing yet. But I sent that telegram to the territorial marshal like you asked. Got a reply this morning." He handed Liam a paper. "Seems Harrington's been skirting the law for years. Marshall's been looking for an excuse to investigate him." Liam read the telegram with growing satisfaction. The marshal would be sending a deputy to interview Emma about the auction and gather evidence against both Harrington and Edgar Elwood. She turned, startled, then smiled when she saw him. "Liam, I didn't hear you come in. Didn't mean to disturb you, he said, moving down the aisle. That was beautiful. Emma looked down at the piano. It's been years since I played. This poor instrument is sadly neglected, but it still has some music left in it. Like most things out here, Liam observed. Bit worn, but still functioning. Emma smiled at the analogy. I suppose so. She rose from the piano bench. Martha introduced me to Reverend Sullivan. He's offered me the teaching position, starting next week. That's good news, Liam said, genuinely pleased for her. Congratulations. Thank you. Emma hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her since the previous night. Are you still leaving tomorrow? The directness of the question caught Liam off guard. He had expected her to dance around the subject, as most people would. But Emma, he was learning, was not most people. I haven't decided, he admitted. The sheriff received word that a deputy marshal is coming to take your statement about Harrington. Might be wise to wait until he arrives. Hope flickered in Emma's eyes. How long? 3 or 4 days, Miller said. Emma nodded, trying not to reveal how much the news affected her. A reprieve, however brief, was still a reprieve. Will you stay at Martha's? She seems to have adopted us both. Liam smiled slightly. She has a way about her, doesn't she? Makes it hard to say no. Rather like someone else I know, Emma said with a pointed look that made Liam chuckle despite himself. They left the church together, walking side by side down the street toward Martha's house. Their shoulders occasionally brushed, the casual contact sending currents of awareness through both of them. It was a perfect autumn day, the air crisp, the sunlight golden on the changing leaves. Would you show me the town? Emma asked suddenly. I should know my way around if I'm to live here. Liam hesitated only briefly before nodding. It's not much of a tour. Rivercross isn't exactly Denver. Nevertheless, Emma replied, smiling up at him. I'd like to see it through your eyes. And so they spent the afternoon exploring the small settlement. The general store with its eclectic inventory, the blacksmith shop where the brawny smith was happy to show Emma how he crafted the intricate scrollwork for which he was known, the small schoolhouse where she would soon teach. For Liam, the simple pleasure of walking beside Emma, watching her face light up with curiosity and interest, was unexpectedly profound. He found himself noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The way sunlight caught in her hair, the delicate curve of her wrist, the small dimple that appeared when she smiled fully. It was dangerous territory, these observations, these feelings. They led to attachments, to vulnerability, to the very connections he had avoided for years. Yet he could no more stop noticing than he could stop breathing. As the sun began to set, they made their way back to Martha's house, where they found their hostess preparing the evening meal. There you are, she said, looking up from the stove. I was beginning to wonder if you'd run off again. Just showing Emma around town, Liam explained, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. And a fine tour guide he was, Emma added, moving to help Martha with the cooking. Though I suspect he knows more about the saloon than the millinery shop. Martha chuckled. Men usually do, my dear. It's the natural order of things. The evening passed pleasantly, with Martha regaling them with stories of Rivercross's early days, the challenges of building a community in the wilderness, the characters who had come and gone, the small triumphs and tragedies that made up frontier life. After dinner, as they sat in the small parlor, Martha suddenly declared, I've just remembered, the harvest dance is tomorrow night at the town hall. You should both attend. Emma looked uncertain. I don't know anyone yet. All the more reason to go, Martha insisted. Best way to meet folks. Besides, it's just good fun. Music, dancing, pie contest. Everyone attends. I'm not much for dances, Liam said, uncomfortable with the idea. Martha fixed him with a stern look. Nonsense. Every young person should dance occasionally. It's good for the soul. Emma glanced at Liam, a challenge in her eyes. Afraid you can't keep up, Mr. Quinn? The teasing note in her voice sparked something in him, a desire to prove himself, perhaps, or simply to see her smile again. I can hold my own, he replied, though I make no promises about the quality. Then it's settled, Martha declared with satisfaction. The dance is at 7. Emma, I think my daughter's blue dress might fit you with a few adjustments. And Liam, you'll need to look less like you've been sleeping rough for a month. Liam opened his mouth to protest, but found himself agreeing instead. One dance, he told himself. What harm could it do? He would still be leaving in a few days. This would simply be a pleasant memory to take with him. Later, As he lay in the small room off the kitchen, staring at the ceiling, Liam acknowledged the truth he had been avoiding. He was in danger, not from Harrington or Jackson or any external threat, but from his own changing heart. For years he had drifted, content in his solitude, believing that attachments were a liability in a harsh and unforgiving world. Now, faced with the prospect of riding away from Emma, he found himself questioning everything he had believed about the life he had chosen. It's temporary, he told himself firmly. Just the intensity of the situation. It will pass. But in the deepest part of his heart, where truth could not be denied, he knew he was lying to himself. And the realization was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. The harvest dance transformed Rivercross's modest town hall into a festive gathering place, with lanterns strung across the ceiling, trestle tables laden with food, and a small band of local musicians providing lively tunes. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion, from gray-haired elders to children darting between the dancers. Liam, uncomfortably clean-shaven and wearing a borrowed shirt that was slightly too large in the collar, stood awkwardly near the entrance, scanning the crowd. Martha had brought them to the dance but had immediately been pulled away by friends, leaving him to fend for himself. Of Emma there was no sign yet. "Quinn, isn't it?" came a voice at his elbow. Liam turned to find Sheriff Miller, looking considerably less official in a clean shirt and string tie. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Martha Wilson can be persuasive," Liam admitted. Miller chuckled. "That she can. Woman could talk a wolf into becoming a sheepdog." He studied Liam appraisingly. "So you decided to stay a while longer?" "Until the deputy marshal arrives," Liam confirmed. "Seemed the responsible thing to do." "Of course," Miller agreed, though the knowing gleam in his eye suggested he suspected other motives. "Nothing to do with the lovely Miss Elwood, I'm sure." Before Liam could respond, a stir near the entrance drew his attention. Emma had arrived, and the sight of her momentarily robbed him of breath. The blue dress Martha had mentioned suited her perfectly, highlighting her eyes and the golden hue of her hair, which was arranged in a simple but elegant style. She paused in the doorway, scanning the crowd until her gaze found his, and then she smiled. A genuine, warm smile that seemed meant for him alone. "Ah," Miller said, observing Liam's expression. "I see how it is." "It's not," Liam began, but Miller was already walking away, a knowing smile on his weathered face. Emma made her way through the crowd toward him, accepting introductions from Martha as they moved. By the time she reached Liam's side, she had met what seemed like half the town. "You look—" Liam hesitated, searching for an adequate word. "Clean," Emma suggested with a laugh. "It's remarkable what soap and a proper dress can accomplish." "Beautiful," Liam corrected quietly. "You look beautiful, Emma." A blush rose to her cheeks at the simple, heartfelt compliment. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Quinn." The band struck up a lively reel, and couples began forming sets for the dance. Emma watched them with evident enjoyment, her foot tapping in time to the music. "Would you like to dance?" Liam asked, surprising himself with the offer. Emma's eyes widened slightly. "I thought you weren't much for dancing." "I'm not," he admitted, "but I'd make an exception for you." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple offer of a dance. Emma's expression softened, and she placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted," she said. They joined the forming set, taking their places among the other couples. Liam had not lied. He was no expert dancer. But what he lacked in grace, he made up for in concentration, determined not to disappoint Emma. She, in contrast, moved with natural elegance, her steps sure and light. As they wove through the patterns of the dance, hands touching, then separating, then finding each other again, Liam felt something he had not experienced in years, a simple, uncomplicated joy in the moment. The music, the movement, the warmth of Emma's smile when their eyes met, all combined to create a sense of rightness he had forgotten could exist. The evening progressed, one dance following another. They took breaks for refreshments, meeting more of Rivercross's residents, the blacksmith and his wife, the general store owner, Reverend Sullivan and his quiet, bookish spouse. Everyone welcomed Emma warmly, curious about the newcomer who would be teaching their children. "They seem like good people," Emma observed as they stood by the refreshment table, watching the dancers. "I think I could be happy here." Liam nodded, a strange tightness in his chest at her word. "That's not what I'm saying." Emma interrupted gently. I'm grateful, truly. It's just. She hesitated, then continued with newfound determination. All my life, others have decided my path. My father, circumstances beyond my control. Even you, with the best of intentions. I'd like, just once, to make a choice that is entirely my own. To decide my own future, not just accept what's presented to me. Her words struck Liam with unexpected force. Had he simply replaced her father's control with his own, however well-intentioned? The thought was uncomfortable. What would you choose then? He asked quietly. If you could have anything go anywhere? Emma held his gaze, something vulnerable yet determined in her eyes. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I'd like the chance to find out, without fear or obligation driving my decisions. Before Liam could respond, the band began a slower, more intimate waltz. Couples moved to the floor, holding each other closer than the earlier reels had required. Would you? Emma asked, nodding toward the dance floor. Liam hesitated only briefly before offering his arm. This dance was different, his hand at her waist, her hand on his shoulder, their other hands clasped together. The proximity was both thrilling and terrifying, an intimacy he had not experienced in longer than he could remember. As they moved in the simple, repetitive pattern of the waltz, Emma continued their conversation. Tell me something, Liam. If you could choose freely, without your past or circumstances dictating your path, what would you want? The question caught him off guard. What did he want? He had spent so long simply surviving, moving from place to place, job to job, that the concept of wanting something more seemed almost foreign. I don't know, he admitted. Never really thought about it that way. Try, Emma encouraged softly. Just for tonight, imagine possibilities instead of limitations. Liam was silent for several measures of the music, truly considering her question. Finally, he said, land, maybe. A small ranch of my own. Somewhere quiet, with good water and grass for horses. A place where what? Emma prompted when he trailed off. Liam struggled with the words. A place where I could stop running. Put down roots. Build something lasting, instead of just passing through. The vulnerability in the admission surprised them both. Emma's hand tightened slightly on his shoulder, a gesture of understanding. That sounds lovely, she said. Why haven't you pursued it? Liam shrugged, the motion disrupting their dance rhythm momentarily. Never seemed possible. Takes money to buy land, build a place. And I've never stayed anywhere long enough to save much. But that's practical considerations, Emma pointed out. I'm asking about the wanting itself. When did you stop allowing yourself to want things, Liam? The question hit with the force of revelation. When had he stopped wanting, stopped dreaming? After his father's death? Or later, after years of drifting had hardened into habit? I'm not sure, he said honestly. Somewhere along the way, it seems safer not to want too much. Disappointment hurts less that way. Emma's expression softened with understanding. Yes, it does. But it's a poor exchange for never reaching for anything meaningful. The waltz ended, but they remained standing close, reluctant to break the connection that had formed in those quiet moments of truth. May I cut in? Came a voice that shattered the spell. They turned to find a well-dressed man of about 30, handsome in a conventional way, smiling at Emma with evident interest. Daniel Porter, he introduced himself. I own the bank here in Rivercross. Mrs. Wilson mentioned you're our new teacher, Miss Elwood. Emma hesitated, glancing at Liam, who had already stepped back, his expression closing like a shutter over a window. Go ahead, Liam said, his voice carefully neutral. I could use some fresh air anyway. Before Emma could protest, he had turned and was making his way toward the doors. She watched him go, a mixture of frustration and understanding washing over her. Their conversation had ventured into territory that clearly made him uncomfortable. Vulnerability, desires, possibilities. Miss Elwood, Porter prompted, still waiting for her response. I'm sorry, Mr. Porter, Emma said, gathering herself. Yes, I'd be happy to dance. As Porter led her into the next set, Emma's thoughts remained with Liam. Their conversation had revealed more than perhaps either of them had intended. She had glimpsed the man beneath the drifter's exterior, a man with buried dreams, with capacity for connection he had denied himself for years. And in that glimpse, she had seen possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. Outside, Liam leaned against the town hall's exterior wall, staring up at the star-filled sky. Emma's questions echoed in his mind. unearthing long-buried yearnings he had thought safely contained. What would he choose if fear and habit didn't dictate his path? The answer had come to him with surprising clarity as they danced. Not just land, not just a home, but a life shared. Connection, belonging, all the things he had convinced himself were luxuries a man like him couldn't afford. And as he stood there under the vast canopy of stars, Liam Quinn faced a truth he had been running from since Silverdale. He was falling in love with Emma Elwood. And in 3 days, when the deputy marshal arrived, he would ride away and leave her behind. Because that was what he had always done, moved on before attachments could form, before loss could find him again. It was safer that way, for everyone, or so he had always believed. The morning after the harvest dance dawned clear and crisp, the first hint of frost silvering the grass around Martha Wilson's neat home. Liam rose early, as was his habit, and slipped outside to tend to Rusty. The routine tasks, feeding, grooming, checking hooves, were comfortingly familiar in a world that suddenly seemed filled with uncomfortable new emotions. Last night's revelations had left him unsettled, caught between the safety of old patterns and the pull of new possibilities. Emma's questions had unearthed feelings he'd long buried, and now, like spring meltwater, they threatened to overflow the carefully constructed channels of his life. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't hear Emma approach until she spoke. "You disappeared last night," she said quietly. "After our dance." Liam looked up, startled. She stood in the doorway of the small barn, wrapped in Martha's shawl against the morning chill, her hair loose around her shoulders. The sight of her, framed by early sunlight, brought an ache to his chest he couldn't explain. "Needed some air," he replied, returning his attention to Rusty's foreleg, which he'd been checking for stones. "You didn't come back," Emma persisted, stepping further into the barn. "I looked for you." Liam straightened, meeting her eyes reluctantly. "You seemed occupied. That banker seemed keen on your company." "Daniel Porter," Emma said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Yes, he was very attentive. Asked permission to call on me." Something cold settled in Liam's stomach. "He'd be a good match," he said stiffly. "Banker's a respected position. Stable." "Yes, very stable," Emma agreed, watching him closely. "He has a fine house on the edge of town, I'm told, and no unfortunate tendency to drift from place to place." The pointed observation hit its mark. Liam turned away, busying himself with Rusty's saddle. "You could do worse," he muttered. "I could also do better," Emma replied, moving to stand beside him. "Liam, look at me." Reluctantly, he turned to face her. She stood closer than he'd expected, close enough that he could see the flecks of darker blue in her eyes, the slight flush on her cheeks from the morning chill. "Last night," she said, "you told me what you might want, if circumstances didn't dictate your choices. Land, a home, roots. Did you mean it?" Liam hesitated, then nodded. "I suppose I did. But wanting doesn't make a thing possible, doesn't it?" Emma challenged. "Isn't wanting the first step toward making anything happen?" She paused, gathering her courage. "What if I told you I've been thinking about what I want? Truly want, not just what seems practical or safe." Something in her tone made Liam's heart beat faster. "And what is it you want, Emma?" She took a deep breath. "I want to teach, yes. I want to make a life here in Rivercross. But I also want—" She faltered, then continued with quiet determination. "I want someone beside me who understands what it means to rebuild a life from nothing. Someone who sees me as I am, not as property or a convenient arrangement. Someone who believes I belong to no one but myself." The echo of his own words from that day in Silverdale hung in the air between them. Liam felt something shift inside him, a crack in the walls he had built around his heart. "Emma," he began, uncertain what he could possibly offer her. You're not staying," she finished for him. "I know. You've made that abundantly clear. You're leaving in 3 days, when the deputy marshal arrives." "It's for the best," Liam said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Is it?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Or is it simply easier? Safer to keep moving than to risk staying?" Liam had no answer that didn't feel like a lie. They stood in silence, the moment stretching between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Emma stepped back. "I told Mr. Porter I wasn't interested in his attentions," she said. "I thought you should know that." She turned to leave, then paused at the barn door. "The deputy marshal arrives in 2 days now. You still have time, and you're telling me this because? Thought you might be interested in the position, Miller said casually. Pays a modest salary. Comes with a small cabin on the edge of town. Previous fellow retired last month. Moved to his daughter's place in Denver. Liam stared at him, suspicion growing. And you're offering this to me? A drifter you've known for all of 3 days? Miller met his gaze steadily. I've been watching you, Quinn. You handle yourself well. Have a good head in a crisis. And I asked around. That mine owner who wants your head? Turns out he's got a reputation for underhanded dealings. Man who stands up to someone like that has principles. He paused, then added. Besides, I figure you might be looking for a reason to stay. Did Emma put you up to this? Liam asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Miller looked genuinely surprised. Miss Elwood? No, haven't spoken more than 10 words to her. This is coming from me and the town council. His eyes narrowed. Why would you think she was involved? Liam shook his head, embarrassed by the accusation. No reason. Just unexpected is all. Well, think about it, Miller said, rising to refill his coffee cup. Doesn't have to be permanent if it doesn't suit you, but might be worth considering. Liam left the sheriff's office with his mind in greater turmoil than before. The position Miller had described was almost eerily aligned with what he'd confessed to Emma the night before. A chance to stay in one place, to put down roots. The coincidence seemed almost too perfect. As he walked the streets of Rivercross, Liam found himself seeing the town with new eyes, not as a temporary way station, but as a possible home. The small, neat houses with vegetable gardens out back. The children playing in the schoolyard where Emma would soon teach. The community that had come together at the harvest dance, supporting each other through the challenges of frontier life. Could he belong in such a place? After years of drifting, of careful detachment, could he learn to be part of something larger than himself? And then there was Emma. Brave, resilient, challenging Emma, who had walked away from everything familiar to claim her own life. Who had fought beside him, saved him from Jackson's knife, and now pushed him to confront the fears that had shaped his existence for so long. If he stayed, it wouldn't be just for her. That would place an unfair burden on both of them. But she had awakened something in him. A yearning for connection, for meaning beyond mere survival. A desire to stop running from shadows of the past. Lost in these thoughts, Liam found himself standing before the small cabin Miller had mentioned. It sat on the eastern edge of town, backed by a stand of pines, with a view of the mountains beyond. Simple but sound, with a small stable attached and enough land for a garden, maybe even a few horses eventually. It was nothing grand, nothing like the fine house the banker could offer Emma. But it was solid, real, a place where a man might finally stop running and face whatever the future held. Liam stood there for a long time, watching as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across what could be his future. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine possibilities instead of limitations. To want something more than another horizon, another temporary job, another lonely campfire. The decision wasn't made in that moment. There were still practical considerations, still fears to confront. But as he turned back toward town, Liam felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, the faint stirring of hope. He was so absorbed in these new thoughts that he almost missed the rider entering town from the North Road, a tired-looking man on an even more exhausted horse, wearing the unmistakable badge of a deputy U.S. Marshal. The lawman had arrived a day early, which meant Liam's time for decision had just been dramatically shortened. The deputy marshal, a lean, weathered man named Frank Dawson, had indeed arrived ahead of schedule. Got your wire, Miller, he explained as they gathered in the sheriff's office. Seemed urgent enough to push hard on the trail. Emma sat primly in a straight-backed chair, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. Liam stood by the door, tension evident in every line of his body. Sheriff Miller made the introductions, then poured coffee all around. Miss Elwood, Dawson began, his tone professional but kind. I'd like to hear your account of what happened in Silverdale. Every detail you can recall. Emma nodded, then proceeded to tell her story with remarkable clarity. Her father's debts, Harrington's pressure, the bride auction, that was little more than a thinly veiled sale of a human being. She described Liam's intervention, their escape, the pursuit by Harrington's men, and the confrontation with Jackson. Dawson took careful notes, occasionally asking for clarification, but otherwise letting her speak uninterrupted. When she finished, he studied his notebook for a moment before looking up. That's a serious account, Miss Elwood. Forced marriage, attempted capture, assault with deadly weapons. More than enough to warrant investigation. He glanced at Liam. And you, Mr. Quinn? Anything to add? Liam shook his head. Emma covered it all. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. Modesty doesn't suit you, Quinn, Miller commented dryly. Dawson shuffled his papers. Well, I've got enough to begin proceedings against both Harrington and your father, Miss Elwood. I'll need to travel to Silverdale, interview witnesses, gather additional statements. He hesitated, then added, It would be helpful if you could both accompany me. Back to Silverdale? Emma asked, alarmed. Is that necessary? Not immediately, Dawson assured her. I'll go first, lay the groundwork. But eventually, yes, your testimony in person would strengthen the case considerably. I'm not sure that's safe, Liam interjected. Harrington has considerable influence there, which is precisely why the territorial marshal is interested, Dawson replied. Men like Harrington think themselves above the law. This case could help break his hold on the region. The discussion continued for some time, with Dawson explaining the legal process and likely timeline. Eventually, they agreed that Emma would remain in Rivercross for now, beginning her teaching position as planned. Dawson would travel to Silverdale immediately to begin his investigation. Only when he deemed it safe would Emma be asked to return to testify. As the meeting concluded, Dawson turned to Liam. And you, Mr. Quinn? Will you be available to testify when the time comes? The question hung in the air, weighted with significance beyond the immediate legal concerns. Emma's eyes found Liam's, searching his face for some indication of his intentions. I'll make myself available, Liam said carefully. When you need me. It wasn't a direct answer to the unspoken question between him and Emma, but it was something, a commitment, however limited, to remain connected to the situation. To her. After Dawson departed to secure lodging at the hotel, Miller excused himself on the pretext of rounds, leaving Liam and Emma alone in the office. So, Emma said, breaking the silence. The deputy arrived early. Yes, Liam agreed, uncertain what else to say. Does that mean you're leaving tomorrow? The question was direct, typical of Emma's straightforward nature. Liam hesitated, the moment of decision upon him sooner than he'd expected. I'm not sure yet, he admitted. Sheriff Miller offered me a position. Town defense organizer. Comes with a small cabin on the east edge. Emma's eyes widened slightly, but she controlled her reaction. That sounds like an opportunity. It might be, Liam agreed. Or it might be a mistake to stay in one place too long. Especially with Harrington still holding a grudge. So you're considering it? Emma asked, a note of hope in her voice she couldn't quite disguise. Liam nodded slowly. I'm considering a lot of things. Things I haven't allowed myself to consider in a long time. Their eyes held, the moment stretching between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then the office door swung open as Miller returned, breaking the spell. Everything all right here? He asked, glancing between them with barely concealed curiosity. Fine, Sheriff, Emma replied, gathering her shawl. I should get back to Martha's. She'll be wondering where I am. Liam stepped forward. I'll walk you. They left the office together, walking side by side down Rivercross's main street as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty road. Neither spoke immediately, both aware that they stood at a crossroads that would determine the course of their separate, or possibly shared, futures. I meant what I said this morning, Emma finally said, her voice quiet but steady. About knowing what I want. Liam glanced at her, struck again by her courage in facing truths he still struggled to acknowledge. I believe you did. And you? She pressed gently. Have you decided what you want, Liam? Whether you're brave enough to reach for it? They had reached the turn to Martha's house, and Liam stopped, turning to face Emma directly. The setting sun caught in her hair, turning it to burnished gold, and illuminated the quiet strength in her eyes. I've spent years believing that attachments are dangerous, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. That caring too much for anyone, or any place, was asking for pain. It seemed safer to keep moving, to never let anything matter too much. Emma nodded, understanding. And now I'm wondering if I've been a coward, Liam admitted, the words difficult but necessary. If running from the possibility of loss meant running from everything that makes life worth living. Emma's expression softened. That's not cowardice, Liam. It's self-preservation. As they parted at Martha's gate, something had fundamentally shifted between them, a commitment not yet spoken aloud, but present nonetheless. A willingness to explore what might grow between them, given time and courage. Liam walked back toward town, his steps lighter than they had been in years. The decision wasn't final. There were still practical matters to consider, fears to overcome. But for the first time since he was a boy, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included more than just survival. A future with roots, with purpose. A future that might include Emma. The thought both terrified and exhilarated him. But as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Liam Quinn realized he was finally ready to stop running. From his past, from connection, from himself. Whatever happened next, he would face it standing still. The cabin looked different in the morning light. Smaller, perhaps, than Liam had first thought, but solid in its construction. The previous occupant had kept it in good repair. The roof was sound, the chimney cleared, the windows intact if dusty. Inside was simple but functional. A main room with a fireplace, a small bedroom off to one side, a basic kitchen area with a pump for water. Behind the cabin, a path led to an outhouse partially hidden by bushes. Sheriff Miller had given him the key and told him to take his time examining the place. Town council meets tomorrow, he'd added. I'll need your decision by then. Now, as Liam walked the property's boundaries, he found himself mentally making plans. Repairs to the stable, a garden plot there by the southern wall where the sun would hit it best, perhaps a porch eventually for sitting on summer evenings. It was strange, this planning, this looking ahead to seasons not yet arrived. Strange, and yet increasingly right. When he'd first drifted into Silverdale days ago, he'd been a man without attachments, without direction beyond the next job, the next town. Now he stood on land that might become his home, considering a future that included responsibility to a community and, perhaps, to a woman who had somehow breached the carefully constructed walls around his heart. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt an unfamiliar sense of anticipation, of possibility. Liam was so absorbed in these new thoughts that he didn't immediately notice the rider approaching from the town. Only when the horse was nearly upon him did he look up to see Emma, sitting astride a borrowed mare, her hair braided and pinned beneath a practical hat, wearing the riding skirt from Sarah's cabin. Martha said you were out here, she explained as she dismounted. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Liam assured her, taking the reins of her horse and securing them to a post. I was just finishing my inspection. And the verdict? Emma asked, her attempt at casualness belied by the intensity in her eyes. Liam gestured toward the cabin. It's sound. Needs some work. Fresh paint. New shutters. Some repairs to the stable. But solid. Sounds promising, Emma observed, following him as he continued his circuit of the property. It could be, Liam agreed. Miller says there's almost 3 acres with it. Enough for a good garden. Maybe a few horses eventually. Previous owner kept chickens. He pointed to a small coop at the edge of the yard. You've given this some thought, Emma noted, watching his face carefully. Liam nodded, suddenly self-conscious. More than I expected to, honestly. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Liam, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. He turned to face her, sensing the importance of the moment. All right. Emma took a breath, gathering her courage. If you decide to stay, to take this position, live in this cabin, would it be for me? Because of me? The directness of the question didn't surprise him. It was characteristic of Emma's forthright nature. What surprised him was how readily the answer came. No, he said simply. Not entirely. A flash of hurt crossed her face before she could mask it, and Liam hastened to explain. That came out wrong, he said, taking a step closer to her. What I mean is, you've been part of it. A catalyst, maybe. You made me question things I've taken for granted for years. But if I stay, it needs to be for more than just a woman I've known for less than 2 weeks, no matter how remarkable she is. Understanding dawned in Emma's eyes. You need it to be your choice. Your life. Yes, Liam agreed, relieved that she understood. Just as you need to make your own choices, belong to no one but yourself. We both need to build lives we want, independently. And then, if those lives happen to fit together. He trailed off, uncertain how to complete the thought. Then it would be a choice, not a necessity, Emma finished for him. Not one person completing the other, but two whole people choosing to walk the same path. Liam nodded, struck again by her insight. Exactly. Emma smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I think I can live with that, Mr. Quinn. I'm glad to hear it, Miss Elwood, Liam replied, returning her smile with one of his own. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Emma's expression grew serious again. There's something else. Deputy Dawson came by Martha's this morning. He's leaving for Silverdale today, but he had news. A telegraph came in last night from the county sheriff there. Jackson and one of Harrington's men were found dead in the woods where we had our confrontation. Killed each other in some dispute, apparently. Liam absorbed this information with mixed emotions. And Harrington? Fled, according to reports. Took what money he could gather and headed west. Dawson says the territorial marshal has issued warrants for his arrest on multiple charges. He'll be pursued. Emma paused, then added, My father has also disappeared. Left Silverdale the same night as Harrington. Are you all right? Liam asked gently, knowing her relationship with her father was complicated despite everything. Emma considered the question seriously. I think so. I mourn the father I thought I had years ago, after my mother died and he changed. The man who tried to sell me to clear his debts. He was a stranger wearing my father's face. Liam nodded, understanding the complicated grief of losing a parent in ways beyond simple death. And Harrington? Does it worry you that he's still out there? A little, Emma admitted. But Dawson assured me he'll be found eventually. And even if he isn't, I refuse to live in fear. She lifted her chin with characteristic determination. I won't let him take anything more from me. Liam felt a surge of admiration for her courage. You're a remarkable woman, Emma Elwood. A blush colored her cheeks at the compliment. I'm just trying to live on my own terms, finally. As am I, Liam said quietly. He hesitated, then added, I've made my decision. About the position, the cabin. I'm going to accept. Emma's eyes widened, hope blooming in their blue depths. You're staying? I'm staying, Liam confirmed, the words bringing a sense of rightness he hadn't expected. For now, at least. To see where this path leads. I'm glad, Emma said simply, but the joy in her expression spoke volumes more. Liam reached out hesitantly, taking her hand in his. The simple contact felt both new and somehow familiar, as if they had been reaching for each other across a great distance for longer than they knew. I can't promise what happens next, he said honestly. This is all new territory for me. For both of us, Emma reminded him. But I've found that new territories, while frightening, often hold the greatest possibilities. Liam smiled at her reference to their shared journey. A wise observation, Miss Elwood. Perhaps you truly are suited to be a teacher. Perhaps I am, she agreed with a laugh. And perhaps you, Mr. Quinn, are suited to be more than a drifter passing through. Perhaps, Liam conceded. Then, with a courage that surprised him, he took a step closer to Emma. May I kiss you? He asked softly. I've been wanting to since that night in Hollister's cabin. Emma's smile was answer enough, but she said, yes, anyway, the single word barely audible in the space between them. Liam leaned down, his hand gently cupping her cheek as their lips met in a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The end of solitary journeys, the beginning of something neither could yet name, but both could feel taking root between them. When they finally parted, Emma's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if savoring the sensation. When she opened them, they were bright with emotion and certainty. Well, she said softly, I believe that settles it. Settles what? Liam asked, his hand still cradling her face. That some journeys are meant to be shared, Emma replied, and some destinations found together. As the morning sun bathed the small cabin and its surrounding land in golden light, Liam Quinn, no longer a drifter, no longer running, found himself believing, for the first time in years, that home might be more than a word, and love more than a danger to be avoided. It was a beginning, uncertain and fragile, but real. And for two souls who had thought themselves destined for solitary paths, it was more than enough. It was everything.